Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday morning, bright and early, 9:04 in the morning, and you are listening to the show, Utah Home Sweet Home, on K-Talk Radio. I'm your host, Yoshi Shiraki, and today, what we are going to talk about are the ins and outs of flipping houses. I don't know if you've ever wanted to get into the house flipping business. You see all these cool shows on television. Well, today we're going to dive into it in a little bit more detail. We've had a lot of guests on the show who flip a lot of houses. I flip houses, a lot of my guests flip houses, and we kind of just talk the general about it. But today we're going to dive in a little bit of a more deeper, detailed scenario so that you can kind of hear a little bit about what it's like and if it's something that you want to do. So we're going to talk about flipping houses. We'll also be discussing top questions that you may want to ask yourself if this is something that you are looking to get into, some things that you may have not thought about. We will also discuss a nightmare story. I know I ask all my guests to share a nightmare story. Of course, I have my fair share of nightmare stories, and I will be sharing those with you. And the point of the nightmare story is so that you can learn from other people's mistakes and not have to go through it yourself. And we're going to talk about the steps, like I mentioned before, of flipping houses step by step, and so much more. So, let's dive into this. Well, let's start off with the top 3 questions. We're going to discuss 3. There's probably a lot more than 3, but we're going to go through 3 of the top questions. And I wouldn't say this is top 3 and 1, 2, 3. But if you were to say what are the top 10 questions people need to consider if they're going to get into flipping houses, these 3 are definitely in the top 10. And I'll elaborate a little bit on each question. So, let's start with the first one. First question that you may want to ask yourself if it's something that you're looking to getting into doing is, can you leverage private funds for cheaper money versus hard money? Okay, so maybe from family or friends. And let me dive into that a little bit. So a lot of the houses that we buy to fix and flip are in such disrepair that a traditional bank won't give you a traditional loan on that house. It might be missing a kitchen. And if it's missing a kitchen, when the bank sends out their appraiser to check it out, to appraise the home, he's going to inform them that there's no kitchen, at which point now the house is inhabitable. And if it's inhabitable, your traditional Zions Bank, Chase Bank, Bank of America, these types of banks are not going to give you these, traditional financing, these traditional mortgages, which are probably the cheapest type of financing you could get. So that would be ideal to be able to access one of those loans. And don't get me wrong, not every single property won't qualify for financing. There might be some that are in great shape. They're just 1950s, right? The house, it's grandma's house. She's never updated, but she kept it immaculate. You'll probably get financing on that home from a traditional loan, and you can then definitely go in there and do your thing. But typically, a lot of these investors will utilize what's called a hard money loan, or private loans, and I do both. I'll access hard money loans as well as private loans, and private loans tend to be cheaper because it is somebody that you already have a relationship with typically. It is somebody that is more of a friend or family, and hard money loans is typically a professional. To some degree, a lot of hard money loans this is what they do for a living. Some of them do this on the side, but it is more of a professional industry of these individuals that you're going to get to know as far as hard money lenders. Now, I would say that traditional hard money is anywhere from 12 to 15%, and you're probably going to pay anywhere from 2 to 5 points on average. Now, I've seen much higher on hard money, and a lot of it will be dependent on if it's your first deal or if this is something that you've done before. The hard money lender might give you a better deal on their rate if you are experienced versus if this is your very first fix and flip in your whole entire life. Then it's probably going to be a higher interest rate. And the reason is they're going to dictate that rate in many cases based on the risk they're taking loaning it to somebody who's either experienced or not experienced. So an unexperienced person's a higher risk, so they're going to charge higher interest on that particular loan. So if you can get access to private money from friends or family, then that's typically going to be less expensive because depending on what you negotiate with your friends or family, it could be, as little as 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%. I hear that a lot. Usually it's 10% to around 6% on what I hear in my circle, my SOS sphere of influence of people that borrow from their family. They'll typically borrow from around 6 to 10%, which is significantly cheaper than 12 to 15, as you can imagine, which then leaves more profit for you when you go to flip it. Now, a lot of hard money lenders will require a down payment, and a lot of hard money lenders don't. So, depending on who you're working with, you might have a hard money lender that will require you to come up with 25% down. And if that's the case, then another idea that you could do is leverage private money, right? So maybe, let's just say hypothetically, for the sake of easy math, a house that you're looking to purchase is $100,000. Well, you might not have friends or family that have $100,000 laying around. So you want to access a hard money loan. So the hard money lender informs you, yeah, he can loan you the $100,000 with a 25% down payment, which in this case is $25,000. Well, now you have a family member who has $25,000. You just don't have a family or friend that has $100,000. So in this particular case, if you found a hard money lender that requires a down payment 20%, 25%, whatever it may be, to finance the entire acquisition with the exception of the down payment, you could hypothetically borrow or maybe partner with somebody who has that down payment, the $25,000, at which point you will then be able to acquire the property because the hard money lender will now loan to you. And so that's a great way to be able to leverage a little bit of money from family or friends or private money for say, if that's something that you are looking to, raise hypothetically. Now, just to be clear, there are also a lot of hard money lenders that if the deal is good, they will loan you 100% of the acquisition, meaning that you don't have to put a down payment. So if you go out there and you find a phenomenal deal with a lot of equity spread, then the hard money lender feels comfortable about the property where he'll loan you 100% of the acquisition of the property so you can purchase it, and then you will have to most likely come up with the amount of money that's going to take to fix up the house. So if it's going to take $50,000, $60,000, whatever it may be, then that's something you're going to have to possibly raise, or you could hypothetically borrow from a second lender, and that might be a private lender or a hard money lender. That could be where you go to your friends and family, your sphere of influence, and basically say, hey, listen, I've got this great deal. I've got it 100% financed. I'm looking for a partner or looking for a lender on second position who's willing to loan me $50,000 to fix it up. This is the return on the money based off of what I'm going to be able to pay you, whatever you, of course, negotiate as your interest. If they're a partner, depending on how much you negotiate is their split, 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, whatever it may be. And basically then, at that particular point, you get the whole transaction financed. In many cases, that's the scenario that I do. I will purchase a property utilizing 100% financing from a first hard money lender or private lender, one or the other. Depends on who has money at the time when I lock up a property, and I'll reach out to my lenders, and whoever has the cheapest money at the time and whoever has the money available at the time is typically who I'm going to go with. And then I'll reach out to other hard money lenders, private lenders, to finance the renovations, because usually if I'm buying a fix and flip, there's enough spread in there that I can leverage two loans and not have to use any of my own money. You always hear of OPM, other people's money. When you borrow 100% financing in an investment, then your return is infinite because you never actually put any money into the deal in the first place. So by leveraging two loans, you hear this term no money down deals, and you're like, how does that happen? That's an example of how somebody will utilize none of their own money down. When you hear that term no money down, it doesn't mean no money necessarily is being involved in getting down into the property. It just means none of the investor or buyer's money is being utilized. So in this case, I would utilize two different lenders. Now, not always. Oftentimes, I'll borrow, a private loan for the acquisition, and then I'll use my own funds for the renovation in many cases. By doing that, obviously, you don't have to pay a second lender, which puts a little bit more profit into your pocket. So, it's really deal per deal. But at the end of the day, do you have access to less expensive money through friends, family, sphere of influence that you can utilize in your first flip? If not, you can definitely utilize a hard money loan. It's probably just going to be a little bit expensive, just due to the fact that I explained before, depending on your experience, oftentimes dictates the rate that they're going to charge you. So if you can involve sphere of influences to assist you in private money, then it's going to leave a lot more meat on the bone when you turn around and flip it for your profit. Okay, so if you don't have access to any private money, then my recommendation is you better start jumping on the phone and reaching out to hard money lenders. Just Google them, find them in your local market here in Salt Lake. You'd Google them for Salt Lake, and a lot of hard money lenders here in Salt Lake will loan, in the neighboring counties. But if you're, let's say, outside of Salt Lake in, I don't know, let's just say Cedar City or something, then you may run into the Salt Lake hard money lenders not necessarily doing loans that far south. Maybe they will, but again, that's why you're going to want to jump on the phone to see what's their lending area. There are a few hard money lenders that I know of that even lend out of state, so they might not be afraid of an investment down south in Cedar City, St. George, or something like that. But the only way to know that is, of course, to jump on the phone and reach out to them to see where their lending area is. Okay, another question. Once you've got your financing lined up, you know who you're going to borrow from to be able to access these properties, because this house is in desperate need of repair and the bank is not going to loan you the money, so you got to go out and find private or hard money. Then are you aware and know enough to understand rehab costs and what we call the ARV. ARV is basically considered the after repair value, the value of the home after you repair it. So what's it going to be worth once you fix it up? You're buying it at this price, but then you're going to fix it up. Your after repair value, what is that going to be? Because that is so important. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, do you understand how to determine the cost of repairs as well as an ARV? Is, I would say, most newer investors lose money at this step. They may not totally understand how to estimate repairs, and for whatever reason, maybe they're going to do it themselves, and so they, don't get bids from contractors or whatever it may be. Sometimes surprises come up, and even bids, can inflate. But whatever it may be, a lot of investors will underestimate the repairs, or they'll go in thinking, if I can keep my repairs at 30, then this deal could work. But it's really a $40,000 repair job, but they buy the property anyway in hopes of doing their best to, do whatever they can to keep the cost down. But at the end of the day, the cost can't be kept down just because house won't look right unless you do it right. And so they end up going overboard, and they lose money by over-repairing, by spending more than what they had budgeted for. Sometimes they don't even have a budget. Sometimes they just go in. Newer investors don't even have a budget. They just buy a discounted property, start fixing it up, and then cross their fingers that when they sell, they make some money. That's probably a more scarier way to do it. You're definitely going to want to know what your repairs are going to be, and if you don't know how to determine repairs, that is not the end of the world, because there are plenty of contractors that you can reach out to start giving you bids on certain things. So, if you don't know how to determine repair costs, then I highly recommend that you start getting on the phone and reaching out to contractors that you feel comfortable that you're going to be able to work with, and have them assist you when you lock a property under contract during your due diligence period, having these contractors come and give you some hard numbers, some better numbers than the ones that you may have guesstimated, and that way you can determine what your repair bid will be, so that you'll know if it's a good deal to buy based off of what you thought it would cost, or maybe it's significantly more based off of what the contractor thinks it's going to cost. Then you can either renegotiate or hypothetically back out of the property during your due diligence. Okay, so in that particular case, my homework assignment to you is to start reaching out to contractors now, to start building that relationship. Just reach out and say, hey, listen, I am calling because I'm going to be renovating a home and was wondering, if we could meet up and basically start a relationship. Maybe not meet up, maybe it's just, have a phone conversation with them, see if you feel like the two of you click and vibe and can work together, or sometimes you can tell off the phone that maybe your personalities won't click, and you're going to get this out of the way now so that when you do have a property under contract, and the reason I'm sharing this is because I see a lot of investors, they wait till they have the property under contract, then jump on the phone, then start calling for contractors. And contractors are booked 2-3 weeks out because they're so busy that they don't end up getting a contractor over to the house during their due diligence period on time, because they have no relationship with these people, because they're literally calling them for the first time once they have the property under contract. If you can develop somewhat of a relationship before, these individuals are going to be more inclined to help you, knowing that you've already spoken to them, that you're going to need their help to do repairs, a repair bid, to give you a bid basically on these projects. So definitely start reaching out to these individuals now, before, of course, you've got the property under contract. Okay, well then, the ARV. The ARV is another thing that if you can't figure out, it's not the end of the world. If you can utilize a realtor, they can often give you comparables. But here's the thing. Every single investor I know who fixes and flips houses, whether they're a realtor or not a realtor, and I know a lot that are not realtors, they typically do not rely on somebody else to tell them what the house could sell for. They've learned how to pull comps themselves. They've got access to the MLS, whether it's the agent who helps them sell the property once it's fixed up, who will sit down with them and let them have access to the MLS, and they go in, they pull comps. They want to see the data themselves. They want to see the pictures of the houses that they're comparing their future renovation to. They want to see all the details, and they're going to determine the ARV for themselves. Now, their realtor may agree with them 100%, but it's probably good practice to not just have one set of eyes determine the ARV if you're not a licensed realtor. It wouldn't hurt if your realtor pulled comps for you and told you what they think they could sell for it, but you also learned how to do this yourself. It's just good, safe practice to have that number double checked, because let's just say hypothetically, well, we're all human, we all make mistakes. Let's just say accidentally your real estate agent tells you could sell for $250, and you go and buy this house thinking there's enough spread in there, and maybe you have a $20,000 profit in there. And unfortunately, they made a mistake and it's only worth $240. Well, now you're only going to make about $10,000 in profit, but you run into a $5,000 mistake, $10,000 mistake during the renovations. Now you're breaking even and maybe even losing money. So 2 sets of eyes are always better than one, in my personal opinion, and the second set should always be your set of eyes. That way, as you get better at learning how to determine value, you're going to get more confident on what you can sell these houses for. One of the things that I did when I first started doing this is I took a bunch of appraisers out to lunch, had a conversation with them, and kind of learned how they determine value. And pretty much it's the same. For the most part, they all determine value the same, but there are some things that some appraisers shared with me that they'll look at specifically that the other gentleman may have not shared with me. So it gives me an idea of what different human beings, because appraisers are human beings, what different human beings are looking at in a home when they go in to appraise a house. So I felt that was very valuable. If you can sit down and take out a bunch of appraisers to lunch to determine how they determine value, that's going to teach you a ton on how you too should pull your ARV, or after repair value, to basically understand what it's going to appraise for once you go to sell it. Okay, so the third thing is, if you're first starting out and you're doing flips, do you know someone who can help you? And what I mean by this is someone you know who has already done this before. Somebody that you may be able to pay as a mentor, somebody that maybe you can bring as a partner. It's such a good idea. So when I first started investing in real estate, I paid for a mentor. And so I paid a mentor who held my hand and walked me through transactions until I felt comfortable without doing it without a mentor. And there's so many scenarios that can pop up in the buying process, in the renovation process, in the sell process that you don't know, right? And so by hiring a mentor, for me, it gave me the ability to find somebody who could prep me for what was potentially a scenario that would come. And maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but now I'm learning ahead of time, and I'm learning with somebody who's done this before versus going through it myself. So you could pay a mentor. Now, I know a lot of people that will just find a phenomenal deal, take it to a partner, and I should say take it to an individual who has done this before and propose to them to be a partner. And by proposing to them to be a partner, then this individual will come, with something to the table. Maybe it's knowledge and money, maybe it's knowledge and power team, maybe it's a bunch of stuff. But if that partner comes, then you're likely to less make as many mistakes on your first go-round, and you're able to shadow this individual who's done it before, and that's another phenomenal way to learn. So if you don't know somebody who can help you or to partner up with, it can still be done. There's no question that you can't go in and figure this out. But my recommendation would be definitely to seek out some of these education programs. You do your due diligence on each education program. Some are better than others. Not all of them are created equal. But there are some good education programs out there. I have several friends that have their own education program. One's an attorney, one's a fix and flipper, landlord. Lender, hard money lender, traditional lender, property manager. He does everything. And he's been on my show a couple times. Matt Atkinson and Jeff Brailio, those two individuals, both have been on my show. Actually, both have been on my show twice. They both have their own education programs. So I would suggest that, whether your education is local, the reason why I mentioned those two individuals is because they're local to Salt Lake. But there's national education programs. In fact, I'm a national public speaker for two national education programs. There's an education program based out of Chicago and one out of Canada that will basically contract me to speak on stage to educate their audience all over the U.S. And so I personally will fly on behalf and speak with the owners of these companies and do national education. So there's all sorts of education available out there. There's also tons of free education online, as you know, YouTube. But I usually prefer, and I'll give you an example. If my sister came to me and said, should I learn from YouTube and the internet, or should I pay somebody, a large chunk of cash to be my mentor, or learn from YouTube for free, I would suggest both. Get as much education as you can on YouTube, but there's so much value in that person that you're going to pay, assuming they're experienced, because you can actually call them up with questions. As you have questions, you can definitely call them up and see what their opinion is on those particular scenarios, where that's a little bit more tricky in the internet. Sure, you can Google questions, but the answer may not be answered specific to your scenario. With real estate, there are so many scenarios that can happen in one situation that you may find one answer on YouTube to that situation, but there could be 10 others that you're not going to hear about unless you speak with an individual who's had a lot of experience and probably experienced all those 10 situations. Okay, so definitely consider getting educated or partnering, however you want to do it. For example, if you have the funds, pay a mentor. It's typically cheaper to pay a mentor than split the profit with a partner 50-50. You're probably going to pay a mentor a lot less than half of your profit on a flip. However, if you don't have the cash to pay a mentor, then that's where it's a great negotiation tool to be able to say, hey, Mr. Mentor, I'm bringing an opportunity to you. I have this property under contract. I can't pay you, but would you want to be partners and we'd split it 50-50? Then hypothetically, you are paying them just on the back end. You're paying them once you sell the property, opposed to paying them up front. So a great way to get started. I would say definitely consider that. All right, so we're going to go over one more question, a bonus question of, I talked about the top three. Really, this is the fourth. But we're going to go over that. This question is huge. This is something that you're definitely not going to want to miss because it is very, very big. I've gone through this question myself. And so we're going to go through this question once we get back here from a commercial break. So stay tuned. We're going to cut to commercial right now. With smartphones and technology making life a little easier, the SnapLeash has also been designed to make life a little easier for you and your pup. Whether you're out on a stroll in the park, or possibly a walk through the city, or maybe even a hike up in the mountains, the Snap Leash is the perfect leash for you. The Snap Leash can easily and conveniently convert into 7 types of leashes, making the Snap Leash the most convenient leash in the world. What other leash do you know that is 7 leashes in one? With the Snap Leash having appearances on the Today Show in New York City, TV 47 in Dallas, Texas, and ABC 4 on Midday, Utah, you are definitely going to want to take a peek at what the Snap Leash can do for you and your best friend. Make life a little easier for you and your pup, and visit www.snapleash.com today. Alright guys, we are back. This is the show, Utah Home Sweet Home. You are listening to K-Talk Radio. I am your host, Yoshi Shiraki, and today, in case you missed it, we are talking about fixing and flipping your first house. If you've ever thought about getting involved in fixing and flipping houses, like you see those wonderful shows where these people make large chunks of cash, well, we're going into a little bit more detail. For those of you who have heard my show in the past, you know that many of the guests that we have on here are some of the biggest fix and flippers in the state of Utah. And they'll come on to the show and we'll talk about fixing and flipping. They'll give away a lot of nuggets. But today we're going to go into it a little bit deeper, a little bit more detail, as detailed as we can get, I should say, in an hour show. So let's get back to this. Okay, a question I get asked all the time, a fourth question that you should consider asking yourself in regards to if this is something you want to pursue, fixing and flipping properties, is can you afford to lose if you lost a large chunk of cash on your house, on your fix and flip? So, there's been some houses where I've lost money, but thankfully I could afford to lose the money because I was in a position, gratefully and thankfully enough, that I could just go do the next flip and then make some more money again and recoup hopefully a lot of the lost money in the previous. But for a lot of newer investors, if you lose money on your first deal, let's say that you're the gentleman who saves $30,000 up to utilize to renovate a house. Now you go and borrow a hard money loan, we talked about this earlier on the show, you go and borrow 100% financing from a hard money lender, from a private lender, from wherever. And they give you entire acquisition cost to purchase the property. They give you all the funds. But you now have to come up with the renovation money. And you've saved this over years and years of hard work. And the renovation on the house is $30,000. And that's perfect because that's exactly the amount that you have in your savings. And now you're projected to make $20,000, $25,000 on this flip. So you buy it, you spend the $30,000. But before you know it, you run into the nightmare house that basically gives you so many surprises, and before you know it, that $30,000's gone and you need more. And now you're stuck with the situation on what do you do here? Do you sell the property and break even? At this point you're broken even, you spent all your money, but you've hypothetically lost 30 grand. Or do you go borrow another money and dig yourself deeper in the hole because you've got to get your money, your lenders paid back. So you have to eventually sell this house. So do you sell it as is? Do you go borrow more money to fix it up? Either way, it's a loss. A lot of new investors find themselves in this position because of the question number 2 that we discussed. They underestimated the repairs. It was never 30 to begin with. It was more like 45. Or the value of the home was never what they thought they could sell it for. It was a lot less. And so now they're in a position where their very first flip, they've wiped out. That $30,000 that they saved over years and years and years is now gone. And they're out of the flipping game. If that's something that you can't afford to lose, then it may be something that you definitely want to get a mentor involved, pay a mentor. It's cheaper than losing $30,000, I'll tell you that much right now. Or maybe you just, hypothetically, if you can't stomach losing 30 grand, maybe not do that particular, maybe not get started, hypothetically, right? Like if you want to get started, but something to think about. Again, we're going over the top questions you need to think about that a lot of investors don't, is can you afford to lose? Now, there's a gentleman that I know, happen to be friends with, that ironically, he bought a house, fixed and flipped it, put it on the market, beautiful. He did a great job, he always does. His houses look great. And he went on a Sunday to check the house, just to do a run and check to see how it looks and if the floors are clean. Right now it's winter, and this is very recent. Went over to check the house, and if you can imagine, I've never heard of this scenario, situation, story, whatever you want to call it, ever before in my life, but the driveway was gone. Somebody had mistakenly taken out the wrong driveway to a house and they took out his driveway, right? So this is beyond his control. This is a scenario where now he's got to dump more money into the house, not because of a mistake that he made on the home, not because he undervalued it or underestimated the repairs or overspent or nothing like that. This is somebody else who came in, demolitioned his driveway, took all the concrete. I mean, it was just dirt. There was no pile of concrete. I mean, they took it all away. It was professionally done. And then we showed up, he had no driveway. Now, of course, this company realized that they made the biggest mistake because they never came back. And so to this day, to the best of my knowledge, unfortunately, this individual never found out which company came out and ripped out his driveway. So now he's stuck with an expense that he was not not including in his estimated repair budget. He's got to put in another driveway. And so these are kind of scenarios that you need to be prepared for. And my recommendation, if these are things that you cannot stomach, then it is definitely, and you want to start, you want to get through this learning process, you must at least partner with a mentor. Find somebody who's done this before, partner with them, bring them your deal that you found and say, hey, listen, let's split this 50-50, and now you're going to be in better hands with somebody who's done this and have experience. So a lot of new investors, and we're in Utah, we're the do-it-yourself state, right? Everybody likes to do things themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that, but when there's a lot of risk involved, I think it's better to include other individuals, even if it's going to cost you half of your profit or whatever it may cost. Okay, so a nightmare story. Let's dive into this. This is a story that basically, if this happened later in my flipping career, which is why I was lucky, because if this would have happened at the beginning of my career, I could have been exactly that individual I was just sharing you, who literally would have been wiped out and would have had to start over from scratch, and all my savings would have been gone. Because basically what I did, the very first flip, I shouldn't say it was the very first flip, but early in my career I was borrowing a hard money loan and then utilizing my money to renovate it. And so if I lost money, it affected me majorly because now my bank account was gone. And now, as I mentioned, I'm usually borrowing in many cases 2 loans, and so it's minimizing my risk as using other people's money. But let me just kind of share. One of the reasons I'm able to utilize 2 loans is because of my experience. So lenders feel comfortable giving me a second note, a loan to cover the renovations. If I was brand new, I probably wouldn't have a lender who's going to give me a second loan. But back to the story. I purchased this home, and this home was supposed to be a really minor rehab. It was one of the ones that I was going to spend the least amount of money on. It was like I walked through the house. Actually, I didn't walk through the house. I bought this house sight unseen. I watched a video. So I bought it from a wholesaler. And the wholesaler had filmed a video, and so I couldn't get access. The rule was the wholesaler, said the house is still being occupied. And so there's no showings. You're basically going to have to make the decision if you want to buy this house or not buy this house based off of this video and the picture. So if you don't want to purchase a house sight unseen, then this is not the house for you. Well, I buy a lot of houses sight unseen, so it wasn't that big of a deal for me. I can get a lot of information from a good video. So I watched the video and I was like, wow, that's good shape. I mean, a little dated, but not that dated. And a lot of the bathroom, a lot of the kitchen, a lot of it was in good shape. So I was like, sure, this property had a little less profit than I would have liked, but it also had a lot less work than I normally would do. So I thought, yeah, the trade is there. I'll be able to buy this, not spend a lot of money. I'm not going to make a ton, but it's a base hit, right? It's always good. Usually, baseball teams that consistently hit base hits win the game versus the team that hits 1 or 2 home runs, right? So it's a base hit. I like base hits. Nice, consistent income constantly coming in, base hit after base hit. Sure, home runs are nice, but base hits are great. So we end up buying this property and we start diving into it, and I'm not kidding you, everything that could happen wrong happened wrong. And we dove into this property, started renovating, and then next thing you know, one of the biggest things that we ran into was plumbing issues. So the house had plumbing done that we're guessing, we can't confirm, was probably done by the homeowner, which if you know if you know plumbing, then that's not the end of the world. If you can do your own plumbing, that's great. But unfortunately, this individual wasn't the best plumber, or whoever plumbed it. I just happen to think it was probably the homeowner, because we got word that he was a very do-it-yourself guy. And so we're just guessing. He may have hired a plumber. Whoever it was, whoever plumbed had not connected the joints very well in a lot of different locations. And they must have just recently replumbed, thinking, oh, let's fix these things because we're getting ready to sell. I don't know when, but one day we just show up at the house and our basement ceiling had caved in several different places, and it was like one day, and then we came back a week later, and another space and another location, the ceiling caved in, and it was basically dripping water, leaking water over time. So, between cleaning up the water and fixing up the plumbing and all the other stuff that were unrelated to plumbing, we ended up, I think it was close to almost 20 grand negative. And I'll tell you right now, when you know that you are not going to make money on a flip, but you still have another $15,000 that you still need to put into it before it's done, so you can at least sell it, because you want to get back at least what you can get back. You don't want to lose all your money. In this case, we lost $20,000, but we didn't want to lose more than that. So we had to finish the house. That's the hardest part, is you still have to finish it. So it is very difficult to keep spending more money when you have already done the accounting, knowing I'm already in the negative on this particular transaction, and I got to keep spending. So basically got that property done. When it was done, it looked drop dead gorgeous. It sold for top dollar in the market. It was very desirable. Everybody loved it. The problem is we unfortunately overspent what we should have spent in that particular neighborhood, so we couldn't get the money back that we had spent and put into it. So hypothetically, it was, a nightmare situation. So some of the things that, I learned in this particular scenario is, again, can you afford to lose? In this particular case, I bought the property sight unseen. Maybe if we would have had a home inspector go in, they can oftentimes locate moisture behind a wall. Maybe we would have discovered, had we gotten a home inspection, where this moisture was. But because we buy property sight unseen, we usually buy them without home inspections. That was just something, that's just part of the game. That's just what we do over and over. That's what a lot of flippers do. We just buy it as is. And so in this particular case, I bought it as is, not knowing that what I saw in the video the property was a lot worse than what I could see on the video, and so dove into it. So good lesson here is, if you're just getting started, even if it's presented to you in a phenomenal way, unless you can get in there and minimize your risk by getting a home inspection, seeing it with your own eyes, getting contractors in there to get bids. If it was a traditional sale when we purchased this house, we would have done all of that stuff, and we probably would have caught all this leaking water all over the place, and then we would have been able to ask the seller to fix it, or ask for some type of concession to compensate us for those future repairs. But of course, we bought it as is, and then we had to encounter those extra expenses. So that is definitely a nightmare story. It's never fun to lose money. All right, so now we're going to jump over to commercial break again, but when we come back, we're going to go into the step-by-step of flipping a house, so don't go anywhere. Hi, I'm Yoshi Shiraki, the author of the book, My Body's Just For Me, the book written for children to educate children on the prevention of child abuse. With the assistance of multiple best-selling author Richard Paul Evans, we were able to publish this book as a tool to help break the ice in an easy and innocent way to help children understand and learn how to speak up and communicate. I have been invited numerous times onto Good Things Utah to discuss the importance of good communication with your child in regards to abuse, and also to discuss how the book, My Body's Just For Me, is a great tool for every parent when having that tricky conversation with their children. For more information on the book, My Body's Just For Me, please visit www.protectourangels.com today. And remember, the more we focus on prevention, the less we'll have to focus on rehabilitation. All right, guys, you're listening to K-Talk Radio. This is the show, Utah Home Sweet Home. I am your host, Yoshi Shiraki, and today the topic is flipping houses. So if you've ever thought about getting started in the fixing and flipping business, you know, there's so many good shows on television that you can watch where these guys make large chunks of cash. And we've had, as I mentioned before, tons of flippers on my show here on K-Talk Radio. Most of my guests that I've invited are flippers themselves. You know, they do a lot of different things, and when I've invited them as a guest, they have talked about different topics outside of flipping. But I would say the most of the individuals that have been on the show, and some of them are probably the biggest flippers in the state of Utah, have been on our show, and we'll talk about flipping a little bit. They'll give away great nuggets, but today we're going to dive in right now, especially right here in this segment, more of the detail of fixing and flipping properties. So here's how basically it goes down. Okay, so the biggest right now, I would say that the deal is king. You've heard the term cash is king, right? Who has the cash can do the deal. But cash doesn't get you the deal necessarily, right? You could have the cash, but if you don't have a deal, you're not going to be able to do anything with that cash. Right now in this hot market, and I would say back in the day when the market wasn't so hot, there were deals everywhere back in 08 and 2009, and when we were going through that major recession. You know, cash was king back then because there were a lot of people who didn't have cash. So cash was king back then, deals were not king. It's actually reversed now, in my personal opinion. A lot of people have cash, but they don't have deals, so they can't do a deal. They got the cash, but what good is the cash if you can't invest it and find the deal? So right now, deals are king. So I would say, detail number one, step-by-step on fixing and flipping houses. The very first thing that you're going to want to start to educate yourself on is how to find the deal. Because if you can find the deal, I guarantee you can find the cash very, very easily. It's out there. There's a lot of real estate investing associations out there who you can go and become affiliated with. I used to sit on the board of the Salt Lake Real Estate Investing Association for 5 years. I'm currently the vice president of the Utah Valley Real Estate Investing Association. We meet in Pleasant Grove once a month, and then we have a luncheon once a month. So we meet twice a month, hypothetically. And so I'm very involved in the real estate investing associations here locally, and I still attend the Salt Lake Real Estate Investing Association. I just don't sit on the board anymore, just due to lack of time. I'm now a father, and want to spend more time with my children, and this was back before I had children, so I could basically give more of my time to these different associations and other associations as well. But nonetheless, number one key is to get educated on how to find these opportunities. Because if you can find them, you can definitely find the money, you can definitely find a partner, you can definitely find a lender. If the deal is good, the money will easily come. You just now have to know where to go look for the money, and it's not hard. It's any of these associations that I just mentioned. You just show up and have your deal on a piece of paper and present it to a bunch of people, and before you leave that night, somebody will be willing to buy it off you or partner with you. I mean, it moves quick, and it happens that fast. You get a good deal, it basically moves quick. So basically, detail number one, step by step, is how to find these opportunities. Now, we'll dive into it a little bit, but just because this is an hour show, we don't have time to dive. You know, how to find deals is probably a good 2 to 3 hour conversation minimum, if not longer, on all the different ways that all these investors, myself included, in the Salt Lake area will find these undervalued, underpriced, in desperate need of repair properties. But the first one, basically, I would say the most popular one, and I'll share you the most popular one, but that one happens to consist of a budget. You're going to need a marketing budget. But the one that's the most popular is a mailing campaign. You're going to basically send a postcard, a letter, whatever you choose to mail. And you may have even received one of these postcards or letters in your mailbox before. And it just basically says to some degree that they buy houses, right? Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I buy houses in your area. If you're interested in selling, please give me a call. I mean, the message is relatively similar, but a little different for every person, whatever they write in their postcard or their letter. And what happens is, a lot of people get this postcard. The majority of them throw them away because they have no intent to sell. They have no desire to sell. But that postcard also lands in the hands of somebody who may, have just inherited grandma's house and grandma's house is super dated, or maybe it's rough, maybe it needs a new roof, maybe it's leaking, maybe it's just, whoever's house that they have ownership to, maybe it's their house, is in desperate need of repair. Not a phenomenal house maybe necessarily to put on the market, because a lot of people will come look at it and then not want to buy it because it's, you already know that this house is going to have challenges selling. But an investor, as we talked about, not that long ago, is open to buying as is. You're not going to have to worry about him getting a home inspection in many cases. You don't have to worry about him, nickeling and diming you. They're just going to buy as is. They're going to make you an offer, and it's basically a cash offer to close quickly. And I shouldn't say you don't have to worry about them nickeling and diming you. Some of them do, of course. But they're basically going to give you a number saying, this is the number I need to buy your house at for me to go in there, spend the money to buy your home, for me to spend the money to fix it up, and then this is, of course, is my living. I need to have a little left over to have an income. This is the offer I'm going to be able to present to you. And of course, you don't have to accept it. If you don't like the number, don't accept it. But if you do like the number, then it's a very easy way to sell a home. So I would say the most popular way is mailing campaigns. A lot of investors will send these letters out, and then somebody will get it who's just open to that easy way to sell. It's kind of like the car dealership method. If you think about it, you could probably sell your car and get more money than going into the car dealer and trading it in. But if you were to sell your own car, put it on KSL or Craigslist and advertise it, and then you're going to have like 50 people want to come test drive it who don't end up wanting to buy it. It takes up a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of inconvenience, and then at the end of the day, maybe somebody wants to buy it but they lowball you, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's just easier to take it to the car dealer, take less, and be done with it. That's basically what this scenario is. For some people, it's just easy. It's just easy and they want to get it done. So the most common way is definitely the mailing campaign. However, like I mentioned, you got to have a marketing budget to send all these letters out. So if you don't have a marketing budget, then my recommendation is to jump on the phone and call for sale by owners. Okay, and you're going to probably make it just like you're going to send out a lot of letters, and a lot of people are going to throw them away. But you're going to find, one or two that are opening to selling it to you. Same thing with for sale by owners. You're going to make a ton of calls. Most of them are going to say no, but you're going to find maybe one or two who are going to be open to selling it to you. So step number one is find the deal. Okay, once you found the deal, let's dive into step number two. Now, and assuming that everything's approved and you've locked it under contract. So you've got it under contract. You haven't bought it yet. Step number two is now you've got to buy it. Now you have to buy it, right? You're going to finance it. So now you need to reach out to whoever's going to assist you in the financing. And we talked about that at the beginning of the show. Do you know anyone who you can leverage private funds with, because that's cheaper? If you do, great. Now you've got an opportunity to finance the property. If you don't, then my recommendation is to start reaching out to hard money lenders so that you can understand who's going to be able to finance, and if that hard money lender is going to require you to put a down payment or not put a down payment, right? So second phase, after everything's approved, you did your due diligence. If granted you did due diligence, let's say this is all done, and now you feel comfortable moving forward. You're not backing out, you're not renegotiating. You're now at the phase where you feel comfortable or purchasing it. Step number two is to get it financed. So make sure you have your ducks lined up in row to purchase it. Okay, now you own it. So the next step is you got to go in there and fix this property up. And you've already got your rehab budget because you did that back in due diligence, right? So this is now you've owned it. You already know it's going to cost $40,000 to fix up. You've got to put together a good plan. Now, if you're kind of going to do it yourself to save money, great. I definitely recommend having a conversation, maybe chatting with some contractors, take them out to dinner, whatever you need to do, and ask them, because there is definitely an order on how you should renovate a home. You don't want to put in carpet first, hypothetically, let's just say for an example, brand new carpet, very, very first, and then have all your contractors stomp on it while they're painting, while they're doing sheetrock, and now your carpet's getting trashed, right, with sheetrock mud and tape and all that stuff. So carpet flooring is going to go in last. It's after the house has been all put together, and nobody's going to be walking on that floor anymore except for new potential buyers. Then that's hypothetically when you may want to consider putting the flooring is at the end. So there's definitely an order, and that was something I didn't know when I first started, and I just went in there and kind of guessed my way. Luckily, I was able to guess right on the flooring, but there were a lot of other things that I guessed wrong and went, oh man, I wish I would have done that first. So learn the renovation process. Okay, so now you've gone in there, you've renovated it, and now it's time to put it on the market. Your house looks gorgeous, it's beautiful, this is the time that we get to cash in and make the money. And during the due diligence process, we had already determined an ARV. We had already done that, an after repair value, but 4 months, 5 months, 6 months has now gone by since then, because it took us 4, 5, 6 months to renovate the home. And in this market that we're in today that's been increasing, it's very possible that your ARV has gone up. Now in 2009, values were going down, so you might have thought that you could have sold your house for $200,000. 6 months later, it's only worth $185 because the market was going down so quick. Today, it's a little bit different. So basically, what you're going to want to do is pull the comps again one more time to make sure that the value that you're going to put your house on the market is not gone up or down. Because in this case, if it's gone up and you list it for the price that you looked up 4, 5, 6 months ago, you may be leaving money on the table, right? So you're definitely going to want to reconfirm that value of that particular property. All right, so now you've determined the ARV of the house again, right? We've reconfirmed it, and maybe it's gone up, maybe it's gone down. A couple of things that you may want to consider now at this particular point is, are you going to do an open house? Are you going to, list it on the market at a price lower than what you think it could sell for? That strategy is very popular because it attracts a lot of attention, and then what happens is people get into a bidding war and end up basically, sometimes the house sells for more than what you're asking. So there's different scenarios on what you may want to list the property at. So that's something that you're going to have to figure out and determine, depending on how much competition's out there on the market, how many other houses are for sale. All of these good things will help you understand. Do you want to just list it at top dollar? Do you want to list it a little less than top dollar, drive more attention? Do you want to get an open house? Basically all of these marketing options. And then once you've listed it, whether you're doing it yourself or with a real estate agent, you could be a for sale by owner, you could list it with an agent, you may be an agent, whatever it is, then of course you're going to put it on the market and turn around and sell it, and hopefully sell it for a profit. So on that note, I want to thank you all for listening to the show, Utah Home Sweet Home. This is K-Talk Radio. I'm your host, Yoshi Shiraki. And until next week, I hope you all have a spectacular rest of the day.